Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. Nobody wants to hear that garbage. The words cut through the cold night air, sharper than the autumn wind. The group of teenagers laughed, high-fiving each other as the old man's weathered fingers trembled against the guitar strings. He didn't look up, didn't stop playing, but something in his shoulders seemed to collapse inward, folding like the last autumn leaves being crushed underfoot. Around him, the evening crowd flowed like a river diverted around a stone. Business people clutching coffee cups, couples walking hand in hand, tourists studying maps on their phones. Nobody paused. Nobody listened. The old musician's melody drifted lonely into the darkness, a beautiful song without an audience. His guitar case lay open at his feet, empty, save for 2 crumpled dollar bills and some scattered coins that barely caught the glow of the streetlights. The teenagers continued their taunting, emboldened by the public's indifference. "Maybe try learning to play first," one shouted, mimicking the old man's trembling hands to more laughter. What they didn't notice was the figure who had stopped walking, a man in a worn leather jacket, his face half hidden beneath a slouched hat, watching the scene unfold with growing intensity. The guitar case he carried wasn't just for show. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The old musician's fingers moved with a grace that belied their trembling. His melody was hauntingly beautiful, a Spanish guitar piece that should have stopped passers-by in their tracks. In another time, perhaps in another place, he might have filled concert halls. Now, his stage was a worn patch of concrete, his spotlight the harsh glow of street lamps, his audience the indifferent night. The teenagers weren't finished. Their ringleader, a tall boy with an expensive jacket and carefully styled hair, stepped closer. "My grandpa plays better, and he's been dead for 5 years." His friends erupted in laughter as he made a theatrical bow to them, playing to his audience. The old man's eyes remained downcast, fixed on his moving fingers, but a subtle flinch revealed the wound. He had heard every word, felt every barb. The man in the leather jacket remained still, watching. There was something familiar about him, the way he stood, perhaps, or how he tilted his head as he listened. But in the evening shadows, with his hat pulled low, no one gave him a second glance. This was New York, after all, where everyone had somewhere more important to be, someone more important to see. The old musician transitioned into a new melody, his fingers finding the notes of Recuerdos de la Alhambra. Despite the chill, despite the mockery, there was beauty in how his hands coaxed the music from the worn instrument. The soundtrack of a lifetime played for no one. A mother hurried past, pulling her curious child who had started to slow down. "Don't stare," she whispered, loud enough for others to hear. "Keep walking," as if poverty and age were contagious, as if talent unrecognized wasn't worth acknowledging. The tall teenager's phone appeared in his hand. "This is going on TikTok. How not to street perform." His friends clustered around, eagerly suggesting captions, each more cruel than the last. They were young, privileged, bored, a dangerous combination that turned another's dignity into their evening's entertainment. Their laughter grew louder, drawing attention from passers-by who glanced over, then quickly away, unwilling to get involved. The man in the leather jacket shifted his weight. His fingers tightened around his own guitar case. There was a tension in his stance now, a coiled energy. Someone bumped into him, muttered an apology, then did a double take. A whisper, "Is that?" But the question faded as the person hurried away, unsure and unwilling to find out if their eyes had deceived them. The old musician's song reached a crescendo, his fingers dancing across the strings with surprising dexterity. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the world might pause to listen. A woman slowed her pace. A businessman glanced over. But then, the tallest teenager stepped forward again, deliberately dropping a penny into the guitar case with exaggerated care. "Don't spend it all in one place, Gramps," he sneered as his friends howled with laughter. The penny made a hollow sound against the near-empty case. The old man's playing faltered just for a moment, a single, wrong note that hung in the air like a confession. His dignity was eroding with each passing moment, each cruel word, each indifferent face that refused to acknowledge his humanity. The man in the leather jacket made his decision. He set his own guitar case down carefully against a nearby wall. With deliberate steps, he moved forward, his posture changing, straightening. As he stepped into the light, the shadows fell away from his face, revealing features that had graced magazine covers and movie posters. A woman gasped. A phone camera flashed. The teenagers, still laughing, didn't notice as Johnny Depp removed his hat and ran a hand through his distinctive hair. They didn't see him approach until he was already there, standing beside the old musician whose eyes remained fixed on his trembling hands. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. Johnny Depp stood motionless beside the old musician, listening. His presence created a ripple effect through the evening crowd. First one person stopped, then another, phones appearing in hands, whispers growing into murmurs. Is that really him? Johnny Depp. The teenager's laughter died mid-breath as heads turned. The tallest boy's mocking smile froze, then faltered, his phone still recording but now hanging limply at his side. The old man, lost in his music, hadn't yet noticed. His song continued, fingers moving with muscle memory built over decades, eyes still lowered. Johnny made no move to interrupt, simply closed his eyes and listened, head slightly tilted. It was the posture of someone who knew music, who understood its language. With each passing note, more people gathered, but they weren't watching the old musician. They were watching Johnny Depp watching him. "That's Francisco Tárrega," Johnny said finally, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. "One of the most difficult classical guitar pieces ever written." The old man's fingers stuttered briefly on the strings as he realized someone was speaking to him. He looked up, confused by the growing crowd, by the man standing beside him. Recognition dawned slowly in his weathered face, followed by disbelief. His hands stilled on the guitar. "Please," Johnny said, gesturing to the instrument. "Don't stop on my account. It's beautiful." The old musician's hands trembled differently now, not from cold or age, but from the sudden spotlight. Phone cameras flashed around them like fireflies in the gathering darkness. The crowd, indifferent moments before, now pressed closer, their attention a tangible force. Johnny turned to face them, raising his hands slightly. "Give him some space, please," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Art needs room to breathe." The crowd reluctantly stepped back, but no one walked away. The teenagers stood frozen, the tall one's face flushed with something between embarrassment and dawning horror as he realized his TikTok was still recording. Johnny returned his attention to the old musician. "I've been playing guitar for years," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "And I've never mastered Tárrega." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and without hesitation dropped several $100 bills into the near-empty guitar case. The crowd murmured. Someone started filming. "That's real talent you've got," Johnny continued, his eyes meeting the old man's. "And real talent deserves recognition." The old musician stared at the money, then up at Johnny, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Senor Depp," he said quietly, his accent thick with Spanish roots. "I saw you in that pirate movie. My grandchildren, they love it." His weathered face broke into a smile that transformed him, erasing years of hardship in an instant. "But I did not expect you to love Tarrega." Johnny laughed, a warm, genuine sound that further transformed the atmosphere. "I've been fascinated by Spanish guitar since I was a teenager," he explained, retrieving his own guitar case. "May I join you?" The old musician's eyes widened further, but he nodded eagerly, shifting to make space on his small bench. The crowd, sensing something extraordinary, fell into an expectant hush. Someone whispered, "Is this for real?" Another voice, "I think Johnny Depp is about to jam with a homeless guy." The teenagers stood rooted to the spot, no longer laughing. The tall one slipped his phone into his pocket, his earlier mockery now a visible weight on his shoulders. His friends looked uncomfortable, avoiding each other's eyes. One of them started to step forward, perhaps to leave, but Johnny looked up at that moment, his gaze finding them in the crowd. "You," he called, pointing to the tall teenager. "You seemed very interested in this gentleman's performance earlier. Why don't you come closer? Get a better view." It wasn't a suggestion. The crowd parted, all eyes turning to the boy whose face now burned with shame. His friends stepped away from him, creating distance. Johnny waited, guitar in hand, one eyebrow raised. The teenager hesitated, then moved forward slowly, as if approaching judgment. "What's your name?" Johnny asked when the boy stood before them. "Tyler," he mumbled, eyes downcast. "Look at me, Tyler," Johnny said, his voice still gentle but with an unmistakable edge of steel. The boy raised his eyes. "Have you ever tried to play guitar? This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk." Tyler shifted uncomfortably under Johnny's steady gaze. "I tried once. It was too hard." His voice was small, stripped of its earlier bravado. The crowd around them had grown, dozens of phones recording the scene. Tomorrow, this would be everywhere. Tyler knew it, Johnny knew it, everyone knew it. This moment would follow Tyler long after tonight. "It is hard," Johnny agreed, running his fingers lightly over the strings of his own guitar, a beautiful vintage Gibson that probably cost more than what most people in the crowd earned in months. "It takes years of practice, decades." He nodded toward the old musician. "Senor?" "Alejandro," the old man supplied, sitting straighter now, dignity returning to his posture. "Senor Alejandro here has probably been playing longer than you've been alive, Tyler." Johnny's voice carried to the edges of the crowd, which had fallen completely silent. "That penny you threw? It can't begin to pay for what he's offering." Tyler swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "Don't tell me," Johnny said, tilting his head toward Alejandro. "Tell him." Tyler turned to the old musician, shame written across his face. "I'm sorry, sir. I was being stupid. Your playing it's actually amazing." Alejandro studied the boy for a long moment, his weathered face unreadable. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. To apologize with honesty, this takes courage. More courage than to mock an old man. His accent gave the words a musical quality, a wisdom that seemed to emanate from his very being. Tyler hesitantly shook the offered hand, relief washing over his features. Johnny nodded approvingly, then positioned his guitar. "So, Alejandro, shall we show them how it's done?" Without waiting for an answer, he began to play, fingers dancing over the strings in an intricate rhythm that complemented Alejandro's earlier piece. After a few bars, he nodded encouragingly to the old musician. Alejandro rejoined with his own guitar, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. The two melodies intertwined, Johnny's modern interpretation and Alejandro's traditional style creating something entirely new. People in the crowd began to sway, mesmerized by the impromptu duet. A woman wiped away a tear. A businessman set down his briefcase, forgotten. The evening paused, transformed by music and unexpected kindness. Tyler stood watching, transfixed like the rest. Johnny looked up at him again, never missing a note. "Art doesn't care who makes it, Tyler," he said between phrases. "It doesn't care about age or status or how much money you have in your pocket. It only cares about truth." He nodded toward the gathering crowd. "Look around you. See how people have stopped? That's power. That's what Alejandro has. The power to make the world pause and listen." As their duet reached its crescendo, something extraordinary happened. People began to approach, one by one, dropping money into Alejandro's guitar case. Not pennies or crumpled singles, but 20s, 50s, whatever they had in their wallets. A woman removed a silk scarf and laid it gently atop the growing pile. A business card followed, with whispered words about a local club needing musicians. The case that had held $2 pathetic now overflowed with generosity sparked by recognition. Johnny and Alejandro brought their song to a close, the final notes hanging in the air like a spell. The crowd erupted in applause, genuine and enthusiastic. Alejandro's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he looked at his guitar case, then at Johnny. Then at the sea of faces that now watched him with respect, with admiration. 47 years, Alejandro said quietly, his voice barely carrying over the continued applause. 47 years I have played on streets. Never has anyone stopped to really listen. He looked directly at Johnny. Until you... Johnny shook his head, setting his guitar aside. No, my friend. I just reminded them how to hear. He stood, addressing the still-growing crowd. This man has more talent in his little finger than most of us will ever know in our lifetime. Yet we walked past him day after day, too busy with our important lives to notice. He placed a hand on Tyler's shoulder, who flinched slightly but didn't pull away. We mock what we don't understand. We dismiss what we don't immediately value. But true art, he gestured to Alejandro, true art persists despite our blindness. It's not over yet. The best part is coming. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. The night air had lost its chill, warmed by shared humanity. Alejandro carefully gathered the money from his guitar case, hands trembling with emotion rather than cold. Johnny helped him, passing him a handkerchief when the old man's eyes grew too misty to see clearly. Tyler stood nearby, watching, his earlier arrogance replaced by something like wonder. "I don't know what to say," Alejandro managed, finally, his voice thick. This will change everything. My granddaughter needs medicine, my rent." He stopped, overcome. Johnny placed a steady hand on the old musician's shoulder. "Your music has value, Alejandro. You have value." He looked pointedly at Tyler, then at the crowd that still lingered, many recording this exchange. That's something worth remembering. A young woman pushed forward through the crowd, holding out a business card. "I'm an events coordinator at the plaza," she said breathlessly. "We've been looking for someone to play in our lobby bar on weekends. Nothing flashy, just beautiful background music." She smiled at Alejandro. "Would you be interested in auditioning? Though after what I just heard, the job is practically yours." Alejandro stared at the card in disbelief, then at Johnny, as if seeking confirmation that this was real. Johnny nodded encouragingly. "Take it, my friend. You've earned this." As Alejandro carefully tucked the business card into his worn jacket pocket, Tyler stepped forward. The teenager's face was still flushed with shame, but there was something new there. Resolve. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, expensive leather that matched his jacket. With deliberate movements, he removed all the cash inside and placed it in Alejandro's guitar case. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder this time, meant for everyone to hear. "What I did was cruel and stupid." He glanced at his friends, still standing at the edge of the crowd, uncomfortable witnesses to his humbling. "I was showing off. I thought it made me look cool to put someone down." He looked back at Alejandro. "But Mr. Depp is right. Your music is amazing, and I was too self-absorbed to notice." Johnny watched this transformation with quiet approval. He caught Tyler's eye. Recognizing a mistake takes courage. Fixing it takes character. He gestured to Tyler's phone, still in his pocket. "Maybe that TikTok could tell a different story now." Tyler nodded slowly, understanding. He pulled out his phone, looked at it for a moment, then addressed the crowd. "I've been recording this whole thing. I was going to post it to mock this gentleman." He gestured to Alejandro. "But instead, I'm going to post what happened next. How Johnny Depp taught all of us about respect and recognizing real talent." The video went viral overnight, of course. Johnny Depp jamming with a homeless guitarist in New York City was newsworthy enough, but the lesson he delivered, gentle yet firm, without humiliating the teenager who had shown such cruelty, resonated far beyond celebrity gossip. The clip ended with Johnny's parting words to the crowd as he helped Alejandro pack up his now overflowing guitar case. "We're all better than our worst moments," Johnny had said, looking directly at Tyler but speaking to everyone. "And sometimes it takes someone believing in us, even for a single moment, to remember who we really are." He'd put an arm around Alejandro's shoulders. This man didn't stop playing beautiful music just because the world stopped listening. He kept creating beauty, kept offering his gift. That's courage. That's integrity. 3 months later, Alejandro performed weekend evenings at the Plaza Hotel, his new suit and freshly trimmed beard transforming his appearance but not his humble spirit. His granddaughter received her medication. He moved into a small but decent apartment. And every time he played Tarrega, he dedicated it to Johnny Depp and to the night that changed everything. As for Tyler, his follow-up TikTok documenting the encounter garnered millions of views and prompted a wave of respect your elders and recognize real talent challenges across social media. He became an unlikely advocate against bullying, visiting schools to talk about that night and what he learned about character, courage, and the transformative power of being seen, truly seen, by others. The old guitarist taught him about music. Johnny Depp taught him about humanity. And together, they taught him about himself. Wow, what a story. If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.